Welcome to True House Stories. I'm Lenny Fontana coming out of NYC. And today we swim across the small pond again. I love going across the pond to the UK. Here's a situation. This is where sports meets music and music meets sports. We got a professional player who's retired from his sport, rugby, who's now has stepped into the arena the last few years to really push the envelope and with the love of house music. And of course, the way the world circuit has gone with, festivals, nightclubs around the world, it would be a wonderful thing to have a celebrity like him step across into the arena. But he's coming with his punching gloves nice and hard. He's got a new track to tell us about. But this man also wrote a book as well that I researched. It's interesting. His name is James HASKELL, famous rugby player, now known as Haskell in the house music scene. So let's get right into it. We want to bring him right up. You know what I'm saying? We want to get him right here. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Mr. James HASKELL. What's up?
Yeah. Yay. What's happening, pal? You
nice.
Good?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Thank you. How's things? Tell us what you're up to, where you've been, where you're going before we get to that first question.
What a story. I mean, so I'm good. I'm currently in the studio at the moment. I have my videographer is just sitting on the floor behind out of shot. We've just been filming a little intro for my event I've got coming up on the 23rd of August in London.
Wonderful.
I'm doing a day party, 2 till 11 in Shoreditch, a little rooftop vibe. I've got guys like Sam Supplier and DJ SKT playing, and I'm playing an extended set. I've just been putting my top 5 tracks that I'm listening to at the moment together on a little video. I've just been making a track, actually. There's a track from Cassim called Everything and Anything, which came out in Toolroom. I absolutely love the vibe. So I asked him, could I have a go at doing a remix? Could I have a go at doing an edit? So I was doing that this morning. I mean, the question with me is I'm always doing everything all at once in all over the place. So I just came back from Colombia not long ago. I DJed in Dubrovnik, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Recently, I've got a couple of DJ sets coming up this weekend. So yeah, mate, it's pedal to the metal. It's Full Metal Jacket, no stop, no go. And also I'm going to pick my daughter up from nursery at 6 o'clock this evening. So again,
wonderful.
just a nice little juxtaposition.
So you're balancing dad.
Yes.
The professional retired player.
Yes.
DJ extraordinaire, world, international,
In a way. I mean, because the thing is as well, like I'm a single dad as well. So my ex-wife and I separated. So I have my daughter 50% of the time. I'm a bit of a workaholic. So I travel around and do lots of stuff. But yeah, I'm as always, very excited by life, very, very curious about life, wondering about life and seeing what I can and can't do with it,
You're still quite young. So you still got a lot of good real estate in front of you. You know what I'm saying?
You're not
like, you're not at the third, let's put it like this. You don't see the goalpost yet. It's like you still got a nice extended lifestyle to live still.
But I will say this, I was playing paddle the other day and I bent over to pick up the ball and my back went into a horrific spasm. So after having a career of 20 years of being professional sport and 14 different surgeries and various things, my body is relatively wrecked. So, I still train and look after myself, but I'd say I might not be in the third sector of life, but my body's definitely in the third sector of life.
I hear that. I mean, it's inevitable, especially with that kind of contact sport. All right. Let's get into it. So what may happen is I may step away and just have that camera on focusing on you. So I'm still going to be here, okay? No matter what happens. I always ask the same question and it seems to be the best way. No one paints their story better than the person that lived it. So in this type of show, we like to hear, now that I have a professional athlete / professional electronic DJ producer, I like to know when you were young, how did the sports and the music find you?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, music for me was always a tool to be used to help prepare for games. So I started seeing a psychologist when I was 17 years old. And I went to see her on the basis of how to prepare for consecutive games. So, NFL season, 6 months, they play lots of games. A professional rugby career is almost 11 months, really. And you have 30 30 odd games, sometimes bordering on 40 if you were playing international. And it's how do you prepare consistently for 40 games? And there's a great quote that says where focus goes, energy flows. And if you can put yourself in a positive mindset, if you can, change your state and get prepared, then you're able to consistently perform. Now, you can't consistently perform on emotion. 40 games a season, you could be tired, you could be not being selected, your partner could be doing your head in, the press could be on you. So one of the things we did straight away was we looked into utilizing music because of the emotive effect music has on you. We all know if you're going through a breakup and you're feeling sad and you put on some very emotional love songs, it's going to push you over the edge. If you're equally having a bad day and you hear a song that's incredible, makes you feel great, you can run through a wall. So I started using music in that way from the age of 17 all the way up to when I retired when I was 35. I'm 41 now. I retired at 35. So what I would do is I'd create a curated playlist. So when I originally started, it had things like Coldplay, Oasis, Walking in Memphis, James Taylor, and that kind of music. When I got to about 21, I started to go to Las Vegas, in city, and I just go there and go to pool parties and watch the likes of Tiesto, Avicii, Calvin Harris, deadmau5. And I was fascinated. I was like, wow, beautiful people, beautiful place. Everyone's absolutely having it. There's someone standing in the front of the room, controlling everybody's vibe, playing music, which is having a very powerful effect on everybody. Sort of got into it that way. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to kind of technology and computers and stuff. And, I was always buying technology, and I love the idea of having my own set of decks. But I didn't really do a lot about it. Then I moved to New Zealand. I lived in a place called Dunedin, which is in the South Island of New Zealand, very quiet. Dunedin is a bit like England was in 1975. It's sort of been caught in a bit of a time warp. That's not doing it disservice, but that's what it is. A lot of downtime. I traveled there on my own. I was single. And so one of my teammates had a controller, had an old Vestex controller. And then I think he went to a Serato controller. And I was like, wow, I want to have a go at this. And I started trying to learn to DJ. When I returned to England at about 25, 26, I discovered that Simon Dunmore of Defected fame, who used to own the label, I was a rugby fan. I got to meet him. We started talking about music, and he gave me a DJ lesson, and I went there and it was amazing. But I was putting on EDM. I used to go to Tomorrowland. I sort of loved that EDM kind of vibe, but obviously he sort of was a bit like, I wouldn't say turned his nose up, but he was a bit like, oh yeah, this is lovely, but have you listened to soul, funk, classic house, strictly rhythm style records? And I hadn't. And that opened a whole new door to me of music and musical taste, and David Morales and Masters at Work, and, the Shapeshifters, all these kind of people. And so I got down a rabbit hole with that. I then started to go to Ibiza and watching people. And I was like, do you know what? I want to take my DJ journey a bit more serious. So I did a course over in the UK about 15 years ago now. And if you were good enough to DJ at the end of the course, there's a club in London called Ministry of Sound where the studio or the DJ school took over the balcony. So there was another event being played, but you got to play on the balcony. And I played and I fell in love with it because it ticked all the boxes that I wanted as a performer, as a bit of a show off, someone that enjoyed the technology. And I was playing music that I loved that had an effect on me to other people that had an effect on them. And I was like, wow, I want to do this. And about 14 years ago, I got a DJ agent, bit of a weird bloke. Guy sat me down and he was like, look, why do you want to DJ? And I said to him, look, I love music. And he goes, good, because you won't make any money out of it. You're going to be seen as a celebrity DJ. And I said, look, I don't really care. I just want to play music. And anyway, he then booked me to play a university in the UK because I've got a profile over here for £3,000 for an hour. And I was like, that is a lot of money. And I played and I was nervous, and I actually played off controller the first time I played because I'd never used proper sort of CDJs. And I played it and I was like, wow, I loved it. Set went really well. And I was like, I'm addicted. I'm going to do more. So then I did another extended course of one-on-one lessons for about 6 months, learned to use CDJs, learned to mix, learned to use acapellas, doing everything else. And from that day onwards, I've been DJing ever since. I've done a couple of other one-on-one courses and other one-on-one bits, and I've played well over probably 250, 300 gigs now all over the place. I've played some amazing ones, where I've opened for Carl Cox a couple of times or 3 times. I've played a couple of his after parties where he wasn't on the lineup, but I played the after parties of his events. I've played to 30,000 people. I played to 82,000 people at Twickenham, the National Stadium over here. And I was really enjoying what I was doing. And then I said to I got a new agent. I said, look, how do you be taken more seriously? How do I get the gigs that I want? He said, you've got to make music. So I went away and I did a production course and another one. I did 5 in total. And I started making music. Got my first record signed 2021 on D for Dance, which was a sub-label of Defected. And on Friday last week, depending on when this podcast comes out, I released my 35th record and it's called Afters and it's out now. And I've released on In Rotation, Nervous, Insomniac, Toolroom, D for Dance, Love Juice, just to name a few, Myth of Nicks, and I've really enjoyed that process. I've upskilled kind of where I'm going and what I'm doing, but it coincided with me retiring that I found DJing ticked all the boxes that I was missing while I was playing. Because one of the things that you have as a player when you retire is you miss the big crowds, you miss the vibe, you miss the energy, etc. So I got to the point where I've now found something I love. I've done some, as I said, some amazing gigs. Guys like Skepta, Fisher, Tony Romero, Cruzy, Marco Corolla play my music. Now, does it lead to lots of incredible gigs? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I'm still unfortunately in that in between. But for me, don't you find
it's a little bit easier because you have, forget about the skills.
Yeah.
You still have the name that crosses from the professional athletic world into the music.
Do you know what? No, actually, the complete opposite. It's caused me more aggravation. And if I was to do it all again and start, and someone suggested this, but I thought I would leverage the followers I had, 2 million across the whatever, all this social media. Actually, people see me as just a celebrity DJ. The music industry, like many art forms, has particular snobbery. I've sent music to people who have loved the music. They've found out it's me and gone, I can't sign a James Haskell record. I then rebranded as Haskell, which actually had a little bit more separation. Sounds silly because it's just removing the James part, but that's kind of what the music industry wanted, or what I thought they wanted. And I started getting my tracks played on Radio 1 and other areas. But actually, if I was to do it all again, I would have come up with an alias and I would have done it, because the music that I've made, and we get about 200,000 streams a month on Spotify, but I genuinely believe that if I hadn't used my name, I would be much further ahead. But we are where we are. I've stuck with it. I've changed to Haskell. I get some traction, and look, I think people are curious and want to. It probably has opened some doors, but I would say that it's
curious.
Yeah,
I was curious. I was very curious.
It's been counterproductive.
I was like, okay, I want to know what life is like when you have coming off a high of a career, 20 years in, and then basically, okay, you're trying to do a waterfall effect. We're using some of that excitement and hoping that you can walk right in and pick up the ball and basically run with it. You're telling me no, it's different.
No, so one of the things, again, whenever you post anything as a DJ online, right, you get the same old people going, I bet if I gave you 2 1210s and some vinyl, you wouldn't know what to do. And I was like, the same way as I don't ride a horse to work and I drive a car, I use the technology that's in front of me. I learned to beat match. I've done, as I said, 300 odd gigs. I've played and gone around the country and around the world to 1,000 people venues and played in front of 2 people. I've played in front of terrible places and had amazing crowds. All that bit about earning your spurs and working and hustling, nothing is being gifted to me. I have no management. I do it all myself. I've had some amazing mentors, Mark Knight from Toolroom being one of them, where we get on like a house on fire. We're best mates. We really enjoy what we do. And he has been invaluable. Carl Cox has been a massive fan of mine and the music I like, and plays my music. And so it's one of those things where I'm sure it has some value, but for the most people go, he's a celebrity DJ. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he does. He doesn't make his own music. And look, I have worked with and do work with engineers, just like it took me, 20 years to be the best rugby player I could be and play for the international side. Why would I not reach out to people and go, look, I've made this idea, I've made this loop, I've made this vocal, I've made this thing. This is the direction I want to do. I don't necessarily have the skill set to be able to do that. I'm not classically trained. I can't necessarily play stuff in. How do I move forward? But I have hand on heart earned my spurs. I've been doing this for 15 years now. I was DJing while I was playing, so I would often walk off a field, have a shower, have a protein shake, eat some food, get in a car, and go and drive and play a DJ set. Sometimes Thursday nights I would go and play a DJ set. I'd obviously do them sober, and I would be professional. But I've done that, and music wise, I went and did these courses. I went and sat and was like, look, I need control of my career. I need to be able to know what I'm doing. And so that's what I do. And, there's been some elements of it being helping me, but for the most part, there's still a lack of awareness that I DJ and play. There's a lack of awareness that I actually make the music. And there's that snobbery online about, people when they say, I bet you could do this. It's like, look, you play the technology that's in front of you, you deal the hand that you're dealt. But, I have earned my spurs. I have been and played those terrible gigs. I've played in restaurants to no one. I've played in pubs.
You kind of have to get.
Yeah,
really
of course.
If you don't do these things, you'll never understand what it's like to really be able to be a great selector.
Yes,
and understand
and that's the thing. And do you know what? So what's really interesting about, and one of the biggest compliments I get, and I had this from a guy called Jewel Kid the other day. I had it from Cash Only. I've had it from Carl Cox, who's watched me play. And, the one thing that people forget about a DJ is you're there to make people dance. Back in the day, the DJ wasn't even on stage. He was by the coat rack and no one looked at him. Now, because of the advent of them becoming performers and celebrities, but your sole job is to make people dance. So I turn up to a gig and I look at the crowd and I watch the DJ before me and I look at the lineup and I go, what do I think this crowd want? And more often than not, particularly some of the gigs I get booked, I don't play my own music because it's not suitable for that venue. And, I've learned that by looking at crowds, seeing what they're doing, how they do it, and becoming a selector as opposed to a DJ because, I very rarely, if ever, go into it with a preconceived idea of what do I think, or what do I want to play? It doesn't matter what I want to play, it's what I think the crowd will work. And Simon Dunmore taught me a valuable lesson. He said, sometimes it's one for you and it's two for them, but you have to build trust. If I've got I've got 2 hours, but after 45 minutes and I've got the crowd on side and I'm playing the right stuff, you can segue away to what you want to do. But for me, it's all about making the crowd dance. It's not about my ego. It's not about that. Until I reach the rarefied atmosphere of your Fishers and your Nick Fanciullis and your Carl Coxes, where they're on lineup. So your Frankie Rosada's, where the lineup is built around them. They have the freedom to play. My job as a DJ is to get people dancing without an ego and to play the right music at the right time for the right crowd. And luckily, the last 15 years have been spent learning that and getting it wrong sometimes, but in other times, sometimes playing a crowd going, look, I don't know why I've been booked on this. And I've been booked before, like after a folk band that everyone was sort of, a folk band. And then after me was an indie band where everyone was sort of, he got instant depression and was wailing and crying. That's not, I should never have been put there, but you have to play the crowd. You have to look at it and go, Christ, how do I get out of this? How do I give them the best entertainment?
Sure.
Here's
the question. Are you okay with the fact that let's just say you couldn't get to Fisher's level, but you're able to maintain a good gig schedule? But you may not be that A-line guy. Are you okay with that? Or do you need to get to that?
So when I played professional sport, one of the attractive things that I liked was the big stage, the big moments. Like there's no denying that. That's what I want. But all I want to do is DJ to people that just want to dance. That's the factor. If I was DJing 4 or 5 times a week and I was playing to people that wanted to dance, I would be happy. Now, does that matter if you're headlining Glastonbury or you're playing massive crowds? No. Would I like to get that? Am I ambitious? Does the music side of my life keep the lights on in terms of paying bills? Not really. Sometimes I get a busy schedule, but for the most part, I have to keep being, my other sidelines is, I've written 8 books on different topics, some autobiographical, some health and fitness. I've launched a men's mentoring app. I'm just about to launch a tequila. I've already got a gin out. I do stand-up comedy. a business where I go and do a lot of after dinner speaking. I go to corporates and talk about leadership and performance.
Wait.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're ambidextrous, meaning you touch. Wait, I mentioned about I didn't know about the comedian part. I knew about the bookmaker, the editor, the writer.
Yeah.
But wait, so
there's a lot.
Now let me unpack. Ask this funny question: what is a flanker?
So a flanker is a position in rugby. So a position like a linebacker, a flanker is most like a linebacker in NFL. Unlike just tackling, we would carry it. So we're a combination of a tight end and a linebacker is what we do. And our position is a flanker because we are on the flank of the scrum. And my autobiography, which was my fourth book that I wrote, was a Sunday Times bestseller, like a New York Times bestseller. And the play on words is the book's called What a Flanker, but flanker sounds like, apologize for language, wanker. So I basically was making a joke about myself as what a flanker, what a wanker. Here's all my stories. And that really resonated with people, and we wrote a follow-up to that, and then a lot of the things I talked about in the book about resilience and dealing with injury and media scandal and loss of whatever it is and mindset is why I wrote a self-help book kind of called Approach Without Caution. So that's kind of what we've done. And as well, I forgot, I've got a production company as well that makes podcasts, and I'm a owner and talent on the biggest rugby podcast in the world, sporting podcast in the world, that's sponsored by likes of Remy Martin, Continental Tires, Amazon, Domino's. So, we do those things, but all of the stuff I do is centered around performing and, a public facing stuff. So that's what I do. So the DJing is my biggest passion, but it is the hardest thing that I do. It's the hardest industry to be in because of the lack of organization, the lack of business acumen, the fact of that I'm seen as a celebrity DJ, that people don't respond to emails, nothing's very organized, whereas all the other stuff is much more kind of business centric. And so it's the thing I want to do most, but it's the hardest thing to do at the moment. So I do all these other things to give me the free time and the spare capital to be able to perform and be a DJ. How
much are you podcasting? How often?
So we podcast once a week. We've actually just finished for the season. So I think we're on our 400th episode or something like that. We've been doing it for eight series. And so, we do that. And again, I've had other podcasts myself, which is where I went to interview different people. That's how I first met Carl Cox. I did a podcast series where it's called a moose douche, which obviously douche in America is slang, but it's also a moose bouche, a tasting thing. So they play that on that kind of thing. So it's where I went and interviewed comedians, did my first stand-up after 10 episodes. And then the second series was another 10 episodes of interviewing comedians like Jimmy Carr and Russell Kane to then do a stand-up tour.
What's that like for you to be able to jump into that hat, to be on the comedic touring, because that's a whole different gamut from music. Tell us what that's like.
Yeah, do you know what it is? So again, because till the age of 21, I've always done what I call after dinner speeches. So you are invited to a dinner, you attend the dinner, and then you stand up and speak, and it's anecdotal stories about my playing career, because I was very lucky in my career to have played nearly 80 times for England, to have lived in Japan, New Zealand, played for a couple of teams in the UK. My personality is such that I was always having fun, getting into trouble, doing whatever. So there's lots of material to talk about. And so I was already standing up and speaking and performing, and a lot of my stories about making people laugh. When you do stand-up comedy, the thing is, have I done what I've done in DJing and gone and visited all the local clubs for £10, £50, £25, done open mic nights? No. What I did was with that, I basically built my own show, and because of my profile, people came to listen because of that. And I think I love comedy. I love making people laugh. It's on par with playing music. I think there's nothing better than telling a funny story, being slightly controversial, edgy, whatever, to make people laugh. But everything I do involves me standing up in front of a crowd. So podcasting is still storytelling and performing. After dinner is in a crowd, DJing's in a crowd, writing stories and doing the audiobooks, you're playing for a crowd. So I am a performer, and so all that stuff fits into it. Yes, we have some minutiae of the business work we have to do and the employee staff, and some of that's boring, but most of the time, put me in a microphone or me in a set of decks in front of a set of people, and I'm at my happiest. And I'm just about to go on tour again in September. It's called Haskell Unfiltered, and it's a bit, and it's a kind of comedy set about, I just recently lost my father and some of the dark humor about that, and being divorced and being a dad and your body falling apart, and so all those kind of elements. So
That's
again,
usually that's what you guys do when you do that. You speak about all the ailments, the bad things, and you make them funny. Robin
Yes.
Williams was known for doing that. Most comedians do that.
Yes.
We laugh, but we feel bad at the same time.
Yeah, but that's how you. So they call it gallows humor, essentially. You look. I think for me, being in a sports environment, we were ruthless. It was a ruthless environment we were in for 20 years. One bad haircut, one ugly partner, someone with bad teeth, bad skin, bad dress sense, bad performance, big mistake. We would hammer each other. Or equally, if something untoward happened, you make a joke of it. And I think, yes, there's times and places to do that. But particularly the British humour is to be negative, to be sarcastic, and to take the piss, basically, out of everything that you do. And for me, that suits me very, very, very well. It's difficult in these climate because we're trying to sanitize people's ability to feel emotions, because we want everybody to feel just happy all the time, which is not realistic. And people tell you what you can and can't joke about. Now, I don't go near any of the isms for obvious reasons, because that's almost a death sentence. But telling stories about my life, how I've experienced stuff, some of the weird stuff. I mean, one of my co-hosts on my podcast, Alex Payne, in one of the books, he said, more can happen to James in 2 hours before he gets to a podcast than most people happens in their entire lifetime. And for whatever reason, whether it's self-inflicted, whether it's whatever, my life is rich, funny, loose, and it just ends up like that. And weird stuff happens. And so it's quite fun to talk about.
Here's something, how do you deal with the paparazzi, even back from dealing with rugby and having that balance,
It's hard. It's hard. And look, I'm not Tom Cruise. I've got no delusions of grandeur. If Tom Cruise is on one end of the spectrum, I'm 4 billion miles away. But, I often find myself in the tabloids over here or the newspapers. You get photographed. For example, I'm single at the moment. I was married to another well-known girl who's an amazing, amazing woman, but we separated. And, if I go out on a night out and I get photographed with a girl, that'll make it into the papers. I was on a dinner date probably a year and a half ago, table next door, took a photo of me and this girl, sold the story. The story was, I'm in love, found a new girl. It was my first date. That kind of stuff can be an issue, but it's also a necessary evil to promote yourself. I think it's hard because the papers, particularly over here, that's why a lot of people move to America, because of the press laws and the fact that the UK probably has the most aggressive press, is you don't always have to tell the truth. And they very rarely print an accurate story, but you can't do anything about it because you sometimes can't prove it. And also you're not going to win. So it's hard, but I'm not pretending, as I said, that I'm, an A-list celebrity where it's all intrusive, but it's intrusive enough in my own context,
I'm feeling Netflix movies. Why do I feel that with you? Is that something that you're aiming towards as well?
I'd love to do a documentary. Actually, we've actually written a script thing about some of the DJing bits and some of the crazy life stuff. There's a potential where we are going to do, there's a TV series over here called Clarkson's Farm, and sort of Wrexham, which is a football club being owned by Ryan Reynolds, and they've made stories. So we're potentially doing something very similar in rugby, where myself and my other co-hosts, we go into a rugby club, we try to rescue it, we try to support it, we try to do stuff. So that is an ever-present thing. I've done reality TV. I did a show in 2019 called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and that gets about 18 to 19 million viewers, which is pretty big. And I've just finished a dating show series called Celebs Go Dating, where you're finding love. I'm still single, so I didn't find love, but I had fun. So look, you put yourself out there. That's part and parcel. It pays the bills, but it equally means that you become more sort of fodder for the tabloids. But yeah, one day I'm sure there would hopefully be a documentary. Maybe. I mean, there's been enough carnage that's gone on to warrant it, but it's just whether anyone would want to watch it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Here's something I'm going to leave you with on this one. There's a big debate going on with the AI world and music.
Yes.
Now we have companies that are basically letting us know that AI, for example, if it's completely AI robotically made or it's AI assisted or human, what's your thinking and where are you feeling about with this?
So the honest answer is you've often got to use the tools at your disposal, because if you don't, somebody else will. I think, has AI removed the power that things like knowledge and skill, that you used to work and train for? So, for example, if you were a lawyer or a solicitor, the AI is coming for your job. But, being a barrister, we have to go to court. No, but yeah, AI can answer those questions and save money. So, you would use them to review contracts, for example. In the music thing, trying to get vocalists and finding vocalists and stuff can often be hard, but there are some amazing talented people out there. I think using AI as a tool like you would use any other plugin I don't have an issue with that. I think using it to solely create music, I would say, is probably not the go, just because as well, some of the stuff that's generated, you can tell pretty quickly that it is AI because of how it sounds, because of what it's been trained on. I was watching a video with Diplo the other day. He talks about utilizing parts of things from AI. I think how that's legislated and how people will be able to know if it is AI, it's a really tricky one. I think the biggest thing, I'm going to have to teach my daughter, she's only 4, is to understand what's real and what's not real, and what to trust and what not to trust. But I think from a music production point of view, I've sat in the studio and I've gone, I really need a vocal, even if it's a placeholder vocal, and gone on Suno and asked for it, created something, put it in, and got someone else to re-sing it. Or if it was good enough, because I make tech house, utilize part of it. And so I'm comfortable with that. Do I think is it going to take people's jobs? Yeah, we sort of know that, but you don't want to be left behind. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to use it. I get sent stuff and I can tell pretty quickly whether it's AI, because if you spend enough time on Suno, being for an example, what it's doing. But it is a useful tool. So I'm sort of on the fence with it, really. I think it plays a role. I don't see an issue with it. I do think it will need to be legislated. And also, for example, Suno being a program, the copyright stuff they put on there now, it is so tight. It's very difficult to kind of copy other people's work, or not that I was going to do that, but trying to get inspiration. It's very tough, and I think it will only get tougher. If something's AI generated, who gets the money, who doesn't? That's for bigger brains to think of.
Yeah, I hear you. And I agree with you. If you do not use the technology, you will become the steam engine that is no longer being used, right? On this note, moving forward, I know you have this passion for DJing. The next year, traveling, book writing, comedy, podcasting. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've nailed it.
And keep making. Do you have more productions under your belt ready to come out, or are you just holding back?
Yes. No. So I've got releases now coming up until November every month. But again, I sat down with Mark Knight yesterday, and the issue that I have is, while some tracks have real traction, one of the key lessons I think that defines people at the moment is their sound, and having their sound and their joined up sound that makes sense. They make music that they really like, and that's, everyone will tell you what to do, well, or what they suggest. But you have to love the music, you have to want to make it. And, a lot of my recent releases are slightly different, and it's whether it's how they sit in a set for you. Do you get to play them a lot? And it's hard for me. And this is what Mark was talking about, because, when you make a Mark Knight track, you know exactly what you're getting. But he DJs, 10 times a month, gets to showcase, gets to trial stuff. I don't have that luxury. So it's harder for me to do that. So what I've doubled down yesterday is gone, look, what sound is it I want? What is it I'm after? What are the labels that I need to sit in, and not being distracted? The problem with Instagram now is it'll send you videos of Luke Dean, Max Dean, Frankie Rossardo, Marco Carola, Fisher, Chris Lake, who's a genius, all these guys. And you'll go, oh, I like that. I want to do that. But you have to go, look, what am I playing? What do I like? What's my sound? What do I enjoy? And if some people don't like it, you have to stay with it. And so I'm doubling down now to go, look, this is where I want to be. This is the music that I want to make. And being ruthless. But the releases I've got, they're all amazing. They're all I'm really excited about them. But next year for me, from a tone perspective, I'm going to really double down to what I want to do. You know, I was hoping to set up my own label, which we got all the way down, and I had music ready to come out, but the guys that were going to help me run it, because I didn't have the skill set, have some staffing stuff. So I've shelved that for the minute. So I'm just doubling down on my releases. I'm pretty much a machine with making music and stuff. So I've probably got about 15 tracks that are unsigned that I absolutely love, that I'm going to find homes for, that are sonically in the right space. But I've also made more. There's probably another 10 that I really love that will not fit with what my sound. They're great tracks, but they're just diversions off the path. And so you've got to stick with it. And actually, being an older person in this industry, you know, it's who you're going to resonate with and who's going to be interested in your music. And there's more music now than ever. And, you know, it goes back to the AI point. There is so much music out there now that you know, you make a release, it gets lost, but it's got to sonically be in the right place. It's got to be music that builds an audience that follows you, because the key thing about DJing now is, yes, you've got to be a good selector, but you have to build an audience. And all the people that are doing really well, your Fishers, your Chris Legs, your Frankie Rossados, your Luke Deans, your Max Deans, you know, Clooney, Prosper, if they put an event on, they sell out. And that's why they get booked, because that's what people, and they know what music they're going to get and why they like it. And for me, lots of my tracks have landed, and that's great, but it hasn't led to that audience building. And, you know, people need to know when they hear a Haskell track what they're going to get. And I've probably guiltily got just caught up with making stuff that I absolutely loved, that I thought was amazing, and it'll go on this label, but it's got to be the right set of labels that are going to be able to back it up. So I've got 2 sets in universe for Carl Cox. I'm playing in the Bunker, 2nd of August or 3rd of August it is, and then 27th of September. I've got releases coming out every month. I'm going to been to Dubrovnik. I'm going to go to Shanghai. We've got a couple of other sets, and then for next year, I'm already looking to play in Toronto and get some American dates. But again, the thing is that I always worry about is what can you control? And for me, what I control is hustling, making the music that fits my sound, getting it out to people, finding homes and for it, and making stuff that's credible, that I absolutely love.
Haskell, my man, thank you so much. You are the true hustler, because you actually really are juggling different hats. I can hear it. And I know I can hear also the business skills. Regardless, maybe you say, well, I don't really know it, but you do know business, you know, and you understand the bare bones of what needs to go into making things. Unfortunately, with record labels and promotion, if you're not the promotion machine, they can't promote the records like they used to back in the day. You know, back in the day, you were able to do a mail out. It would sink in and it would cross into the right markets. Now, if you're not out there with your flags out, pushing your sound, like you said, it's pretty difficult. It gets lost, even though you have a great name.
Yeah.
The music is, because you're also competing with 150,000 releases a day. It's crazy, the numbers. But it's good to hear that doesn't stop you, that you actually have the vigor and the care to make sure that you want to do things that sound really good, that you will be proud to play and others to play. So we can
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think, look, you know, you can have flash in the pan moments. You know, everything needs to be joined up to make a story, to have that longevity, to have a sound. You know, when you're a DJ, you know, back in the day, you could have been signed. You know, Carl Cox was the 3-deck wizard. You know, he made some great music, but he was booked because of his DJing skill and being a master selector, which he is now. Now, as a DJ, you have to be your own social media manager, your own advocate, your own press person. You have to make the music. It has to have a story. You have to build an audience. You have to be able to sell tickets. You have to have the skill to perform. You have to record everything, film everything. And that's the way we go. And there's no point sort of railing against it. That's the nature of it. And I think, you know, I understand that. But the underlying factor is, whatever happens, you know, I love DJing and I will always DJ and I will always play. Will I, I love James Hype. I had a track come out on Stereo Hype a couple of months ago. And he talks about jacking it all in, starting a career, drilling down and focusing on music. I do not have the luxury to be able to do that. I've got a daughter. I've got other work commitments. I will, when the success comes, I will taper down to and I will solely focus on that. But at the moment, I do the most I can with what I'm given, and I've got a story. By the end of this year, I'll have 40 records out on different labels. That's not a celebrity DJ messing around. That's someone who's seriously here to play. There's the story to be told, and the day that it comes, all that legacy, all that work will then make sense, and people will go, "Wow, look, I didn't know this, and there's a story to be told, and it kicks on, and that's kind of where I'm at. But the only issue is, because of social media, the distraction, things taking you off plan are very tricky, and you've got to, I had to hear the harsh feedback yesterday, and Mark, I sat with Mark, and he said, "Look, I love the music you're making. It doesn't all work together. You're signing records for signing records. It needs to sonically be in the right place with the right labels that are going to build the audience, they're going to attract the people that you're going to resonate with. And, you're not going to be able to be, Max Dean. It's just not going to happen. You don't have that link. So stop trying to do it. Do what you do best and put credible music out, because ultimately
He's
the
100%
music tells
right.
the story."
He's 100% right, because I'm saying the same thing. I've had a long career in this thing. So I know what he's talking about. And Mark Knight comes after me. I was the ones playing with Louis Vega and Dave Morales, us. But I understand that, again, it's a business. It's how you're viewed. You're blessed to have different areas to step into. Not many guys can say that. So good kudos to you on that one.
Thank
and
you.
Also, I like your theory. It works, but it will work for you because you're coming with all these tools in your box.
Yeah.
Not everybody
And I think
can
you've got
say
to respect,
that,
yeah, and you've got to respect, what's gone before, and the quality of music and the originality of music. You look at what a lot of the stuff that's very popular at the moment. It's a rehashing of older songs and old classics. Longevity. You need to have your own creative process and your originality, and you need to double down. So I finished the meeting with Mark yesterday. I came in and I went through all the artists that I admire. I went through the labels that I like. I went through the record box playlists that I have played, and I went, what music do I like? What is it that I'm making that I love? And I doubled it down, wrote a list, sent myself, and there was probably 10 tracks that I had to not delete, but move to a folder and go, look, I'm not going to bother signing these. That was time, energy, and essentially money that I had to learn that wasn't right. So I've just gone, the track I was making before this, I was like, right, this is what I would play, and this is what I want people to listen to, and this is where it is. And you have to keep revisiting it. And I think all the skill sets that I learned as a sportsman, which is taking feedback, self-awareness, finding people that you are doing what you want to do better than you, looking back at the past to look forward, respecting amazing DJs like yourself and guys like that, and learning and seeing it, but also remembering, the thing we talked about in the opening comments. It's about making people dance and playing the right music at the right time and choosing the right tracks and what that story says, and how do you get to where you want to be in your set without just going Beatport top 10, bang, bang, bang. That's not how you win this game. And for me, it's an uphill climb, and it's tough, but I'll get there.
And I'm going to leave it like this. And you will. You have perseverance written like on your forehead. Perseverance. There's no doubt. I can hear it. And you're like Mike Tyson. You're going to give that big knockout punch. And if you don't, you'll get knocked down. No problem. You'll dust yourself off, and you'll get back on and do it again until you find that place. And if you don't, I believe with the 4, 5, 6 different directions that you're involved in, you still got amazing careers going on at the same time. So congrats on all of it. And congrats on the release. I'm a fan, bro.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Welcome, Haskell, to House Music 101.
Thank you, my man. Thank you.
Welcome to House Music 101. And people, listen to what he says. You know what? Perseverance is an important part of any journey. And he's done self-help, and you can hear it. He's done self-help like Tony Robbins speaks. You're in control of your destiny, but you have to want to make the dedication and the move to stay with it, even when it's, like you said, I'm not making really the money I want to make. That would turn a lot of people away from this. It's not for the lighthearted, just like
No.
sports. And these people in this game, oh, they're nasty. I know.
Yeah, but
I
but I
know.
tell you what's interesting is do you know what the payback for me though is? I played a gig on Saturday. It was more of like a regional kind of vibe, and people were dancing, and for me that is all that's the energy you need. That's the drug to go. How do I get them? How do I keep this dance floor? How do I put more people on the dance floor? How do I not lose them to their phones or to other distractions? And, that's all I need. And also the other thing with it is I'm a dancer. So whenever I DJ
That's it.
and I like music, I just don't stop moving. Always.
You have to. If you don't, I've always said some of the greatest DJs are the best dancers. Because if it doesn't make you want to dance, you're not going to want to play it. And what is the secret to the dance floor? Bring all the women in and all the fellas follow.
Yeah, that's the first lesson that Simon Dunmore taught me. Make the girls dance, the men follow.
That's it. You get that dance floor packed with the hens, here come the foxes. On that note, welcome again, everyone, and thank you for being part of our journey with True House Stories, Haskell. It's nice to have a professional retired player. I've never had one like you. So this is the first for me, and to hear you be able to transcend us from that world into partial paparazzi world with also what it's like to be in this house music, tech house arena. Look, one thing I'm going to give you advice on. Mark Knight's got great points, but here's what I'm going to say. Sometimes a record that you're not sure of comes out and then it blows up. You can't always go, I'm not putting that stuff out, because there's a formula. Formulas are cool, but you got to go with gut intuition as well. Yeah. Sometimes you'll have that feeling, and it's happened to me, where I go, I'm not sure about this record. It came out and exploded. So that's all. I'm going to leave that with you. On that note, everyone, come back and hear your heroes. Now we got footballers. Next, I want to get someone from Madrid or Barcelona. I'm soccer now, but I'm loving this. And thank you for loaning your time to us, and congrats on all the singles, and we'll be watching. All right, everyone, tune in and catch us each and every time with your heroes. Take care.